the Americans with Disabilities Act, a great act in the 1990s, the ADA. The committee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. I welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, current state of integration of people with disabilities. This is an act that I think Steny Hoyer was the sponsor of, and he's a great patron of. So I recognize Mr. Hoyer at this time. I'd like to remind members we have an email address, which you all know and you hear innumerable times, where you can share distribution of exhibits, letters, written materials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you got that address. I also like to ask members and witnesses, both those in person and those appearing remotely, to mute your microphones when you're not speaking. This will help prevent feedback and other technical issues, and you may unmute yourself anytime you seek recognition. I will now recognize myself for an opening statement. Hailed by many as the most significant and comprehensive civil rights statute since the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 was enacted with overwhelming bipartisan support. The late Senator Edward Kennedy, a lion of the Senate, if not the lion of the Senate, dedicated champion of civil rights and one of the two chief sponsors of the ADA, noted that in passing the legislation, Congress affirmed its commitment to remove the physical barriers and antiquated social attitudes that have condemned people with disabilities to second-class citizenship for far too long. The bill's chief House sponsor, now Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, said in 1990, just before the ADA was signed into law, that the day the President signed the bill would be Independence Day for those who have been disabled. Both Senator Kennedy and Representative Hoyer were right. President George H.W. Bush declared as he signed the ADA into law that the shameful wall of exclusion of people with disabilities finally come tumbling down. The ADA has improved lives of millions of individuals with disabilities by explicitly prohibiting discrimination on the basis of disability and by providing standards and legal recourse for confronting such discrimination when it occurs. The idea that we had a period in our history when we didn't have sufficient parking for people with disabilities, curb cuts, banisters, or help people get up and down stairs, it's hard to imagine. But it goes way beyond that, of course. This nation has made progress in the last 31 years toward achieving the ADA's goals of ending discrimination against and segregation of people with disabilities. The law is yet to achieve its full promise. Indeed, we could devote numerous hearings to many different aspects of the ADA and the various remaining barriers that prevent disabled persons from enjoying the full blessings of American life. It has been a decade since this subcommittee last took a comprehensive look at the state of the ADA's implementation. Given the breadth of potential topics, we have chosen to concentrate today on the ADA's integration mandate as a starting point because community integration is a core goal of the ADA overall. We will look at the Title II of the ADA and the enforcement and implementation of the Supreme Court's Olmstead decision. Additionally, we'll examine longstanding barriers to voting accessibility for people with disabilities. Title II of the ADA provides that individuals with a disability shall not be denied the chance to participate in or benefit fully from the services, programs, or activities of public entities, which include, of course, state and local governments and federal governments. More than 20 years ago, the Supreme Court declared in an Olmstead case that unnecessary institutionalization of people with disabilities violated Title II of the ADA, and that states must ensure that individuals receive services in the least restrictive setting possible. Yet thousands of individuals with disabilities still find themselves in a situation where their only option for receiving housing and treatment services are in institutional settings isolated from the community. People with disabilities continue to face discrimination in the form of over-institutionalization, and the COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated this problem. As of June 21, over 180,000 people living in institutional settings had died during the pandemic. The pandemic has underscored the urgent need to fully implement Olmstead and to ensure that state transition providing home and community-based services. And I don't know if it's based on anything with ADA, but it certainly comes from that spirit we have in our Build Back Better bill, funding for people to remain in their homes when they get older, which is not necessarily, I guess, part of the ADA, but you get older, that's a disability, you have disabilities too, and you should have home health care and be able to stay in your home. That's something that crosses political borders. Another core goal of the ADA is to ensure that people with disabilities can attain economic self-sufficiency. Olmstead requires states to provide employment services in the most integrated setting appropriate to the individual's needs. Yet persons with disabilities continue to face discrimination in the provision of employment-related services. Many persons with disabilities continue to be employed in sheltered workshops where they are segregated from the rest of the community. They often earn a sub-minimum wage because that is the setting where the state provides employment services. These environments do not aid people with disabilities in achieving competitive integrated employment, which should be the goal. The goal is difficult because it's hard to judge, but we need to look at it. The Department of Justice plays an important role in ensuring state employment services comply with Olmstead. 2017, however, then Attorney General Jeff Sessions rescinded the department's guidance document describing the application of Olmstead to state and local governments' employment service systems. There was no explanation or justification for rescinding this and other critical ADA-related guidance. The department should reinstate and strengthen the Olmstead guidance so that they transition away from providing employment services in sheltered workshops and instead provide supported employment in the community that allow people with disabilities to earn a competitive wage while developing job skills. Also of critical importance to integrating people with disabilities into American society is the right to participate in our democracy. Yet 31 years after the ADA's enactment, people with disabilities continue to face significant barriers to access the vote. We certainly hope our minority members don't find any new ideas for voting laws when we discuss these disabilities, significant barriers. These barriers include physical barriers to in-person voting locations, as well as impediments to voting by mail that particularly undermine voting access for blind or low-vision voters and voters with limited manual dexterity. In 2020, many states implemented changes to voting laws in response to COVID-19 pandemic that, while improving voting accessibility, also highlighted the fact that people with disabilities still face numerous and long-standing barriers to voting. While COVID-19 pandemic voting reforms proved to be an unexpected boon to voter accessibility in the 2020 election, states are now poised not only to erase the gains made by voters with disabilities, but also to direct additional barriers to voting. The subcommittee is dedicated to ensuring that states do not erode the ability of people with disabilities to vote. More than 30 years after the ADA's enactment, the law's implementation has fallen short of its full potential. Many challenges remain to fully achieve the ADA's goal of ending disability-based discrimination and the exclusion of people with disabilities from American society. It's a difficult balancing act. We hope that we'll hear from the experts on where it falls and what we can do to fulfill the purposes of the law and its intent. This hearing will do that. I welcome our witnesses and I look forward to their testimony. It's now my pleasure to recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Louisiana, the state where it's good to be a football coach who's got a good buyout. Mr. Johnson for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a sore subject. It's too soon. I appreciate everyone participating in the hearing today, and I